The invitation arrived like a storm at midnight. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's young revolutionary leader, had been quietly reshaping Africa's narrative. But when he received a formal letter, stamped and sealed, from the White House inviting him to a live-streamed U.S.-Africa summit, his closest aides paused. "Are they trying to trap you?" one whispered. But Traoré was calm. He looked up and said, "If truth has to hurt before it heals, then let it be." 3 weeks later, under global media glare, Traoré stepped onto a polished stage in Washington, D.C. The hall was filled, African presidents, U.S. senators, CEOs, generals, and there, in the front row, sat Donald Trump, arms crossed, grinning sarcastically. As Traoré approached the podium, a hush fell. The weight of colonial pain, exploitation, and betrayal sat silently between the flags. Then, in a low, measured tone, Traoré began, "Before I speak of partnership, I must speak of the wounds you refuse to see." Some in the audience stirred uncomfortably. Cameras zoomed in. Trump raised an eyebrow, smirking. No one knew these next 10 minutes would shake the world, and for Trump, it would feel like an earthquake. He didn't blink. Traoré's voice was steady, but behind his calm eyes was a storm. 50 years of broken promises, stolen minerals, burned villages, and silenced voices. He didn't need anger. His truth carried its own fire. "You ask us to invest, but we've paid already. With our blood, with our land, and with the lies written in your contracts." Trump leaned forward, now clearly agitated. He muttered something under his breath to a senator beside him. The cameras caught it. Still, Traoré continued. "You lecture us about democracy, but you fund coups. You speak of peace, yet arm both sides. You build bases, not schools. You install debt, not dignity." Gasps echoed through the hall. One African leader shifted in his seat. A CNN reporter's jaw dropped. The air grew so thick, it seemed like even the lights dimmed. Yet Traoré didn't flinch. He was not attacking America. He was defending Africa, defending its future, its right to dream freely, without fear or manipulation. And slowly, without anyone noticing at first, even Trump's smile faded. Because what Traoré was doing wasn't politics. It was truth. And truth, when spoken plainly, can feel like thunder in a quiet room. Trump slammed his hand on the table. A microphone caught it, thump, as the echo bounced across the summit hall. "Get this guy off the stage," he barked. "We don't need lectures from children." But Traoré stood still, silent, not shaken, his eyes locked with Trump's. "Mr. Trump," he said softly, "you were never quiet when you spoke of grabbing power. Why should I be quiet when I speak of reclaiming dignity?" The room froze. Even the interpreter dropped her pen. Trump rose to his feet, red-faced, hands shaking. But before he could speak again, a woman from the audience, an American congresswoman, stood up. "Let him finish." Her voice cut through the tension like glass. Security hesitated. Reporters scrambled to whisper into their earpieces. Traoré adjusted the mic and said, "Africa is not a child needing rescue. We are a continent rising from the ashes you left behind." Then he paused, looked around, and asked one question. "If Africa is so weak, why are you still afraid of her strength?" The silence that followed, it was louder than any applause. Even Trump, still standing, didn't speak, and millions watched live, unable to look away. Backstage, the tension was unbearable. Journalists were huddled over their phones, tweeting. Diplomats whispered into earpieces. Even some African presidents looked away, afraid to nod in agreement with Traoré's words. "He's finished," muttered a Western diplomat to a colleague. "He'll never be invited again." But they were wrong. Because what was happening on that stage wasn't about politics anymore. It was about truth. In a nearby holding room, an African student volunteer wiped tears from her eyes. "I've never heard anyone say it like that," she whispered. "He spoke for my mother, for my grandmother." Meanwhile, on live television, Trump leaned forward with clenched fists, but Traoré hadn't flinched. Not once. "You came to Africa and took our gold, our oil, our people," he said, "and then asked us to thank you for the empty schools and poisoned rivers you left behind." That line echoed. Cameras zoomed in. You could see eyes watering, even among the audience. Trump's team was in full panic. But Traoré? He was just getting started, and the world had never seen him like this before. A call came through to the summit media room. It was a woman from a small village in Burkina Faso. Her name was Awa. She was 61. She had never seen her president speak live before, but today she had gathered her neighbors, farmers, widows, and young girls, with a radio and a borrowed smartphone. And when she heard Traoré's voice tremble slightly as he spoke of colonial scars still bleeding, she did something she hadn't done in decades. She cried. "I remember when French soldiers came and took my brother," she said into the call. "They said he would be paid. He never came back. And they said it was for freedom." A young intern overheard the call and recorded it. That clip would later go viral. A mother's voice breaking as she thanked a leader for saying what no one else dared say. "Tell him," she said through tears, "that even if the world hates him, Africa will never forget this day." Back on stage, Traoré paused, almost as if he felt her words across the ocean. He lifted his eyes and declared, "This summit will end, but the pain we carry won't, until someone listens." And for the first time, Trump looked unsure. Trump had made a career of dominating rooms, interrupting, mocking, controlling the spotlight, but not today. The room wasn't his anymore. It belonged to Ibrahim Traoré. As Traoré continued, he told a story that hit harder than statistics ever could. In 2019, a boy in Niger died digging for gold that ended up in a Western bank vault. His mother still sleeps next to the empty hole. The silence in the room was unbearable. Then the camera cut to Trump's face. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't talking. He looked stunned, lost. His jaw clenched. His eyes darted, searching for something to say. But there was nothing. Not against that kind of truth. And the internet noticed. Screenshots of Trump's expression flooded social media with captions like, "He finally met someone he couldn't interrupt." "This is what dignity looks like. Africa's lion has spoken." Traoré paused, looked directly at Trump and said, "We don't need pity. We need fairness." And the audience rose. Not everyone, but enough. It was no longer a summit. It was history. As Traoré's speech echoed through the Grand Hall, outside the building a different kind of storm was brewing. News vans crowded the streets. Social media exploded with clips of Traoré's words, sharp, honest, and unafraid. Across Africa, millions gathered around radios, TVs, and phones. Mothers wept quietly in their homes. Young students paused their lessons. The truth was breaking through, and it hit harder than anyone expected. But in Washington, the mood was tense. Trump's aides scrambled to contain the fallout. "This could destroy our image," whispered one senior advisor. Backstage, Traoré's closest aides watched the live feed with pounding hearts. They knew the risks. Powerful forces didn't like being challenged. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's fury simmered. His face flushed red behind closed doors. He refused interviews. His usual bravado was replaced with silence. The summit's director called an emergency meeting. "We have to control the narrative," she said grimly. "But how do you control a voice that millions now see as fearless? How do you silence a leader speaking for a continent?" The world was changing, and no one could turn back time. That night, in a modest home in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré's phone buzzed. It was a message from his mother. She wrote simply, "My son, you carry the weight of many. Be strong. Your words are healing. But remember, change comes with a cost." Traoré read the message slowly, his eyes moistening. He had never been far from his mother's humble village, yet now he stood at the center of global attention. He thought of the sacrifices, the years of struggle, the faces of the poor children who deserved more than empty promises. The next morning, a reporter managed to film a rare moment. Traoré quietly reading the letter alone, the weight of history in his eyes. The clip went viral. Thousands commented, "This is the face of a true leader. A man with heart." But not everyone applauded. Anonymous threats began trickling in. An ominous warning followed. Silence him before it's too late. Yet Traoré's resolve only deepened. If this fight was dangerous, so be it. Africa's dignity was worth every risk. The next day, the summit resumed. As Traoré entered the main hall, the room held its breath. Trump was waiting, his eyes locked with Traoré's, an unspoken challenge burning between them. Then, with cameras rolling live, Trump leaned forward and said in a sharp tone, "You speak boldly, but do you understand the cost of your words?" The hall fell silent. Traoré did not flinch. He met Trump's gaze steadily and replied, voice calm but firm, "The cost of silence is far greater than the cost of truth." A murmur ran through the audience. For a moment, no one dared breathe. Then, Traoré continued, sharing a personal story, a story of loss, courage, and hope that humanized his message and moved many to tears. Trump's face tightened, lips pressed together. He looked away, struggling to keep control. The cameras captured it all, the tension, the defiance, and the growing respect beneath the anger. The question remained, who truly won this battle of words? The morning after the tense summit, the world woke to a surprising twist. A well-known American senator, known for her sharp criticism of Trump's policies, publicly praised Traoré's speech. In a live interview, she said, "Captain Traoré's words were not just brave, they were necessary. The truth he spoke is uncomfortable, but it must be heard if we want real change." Her statement sent shockwaves through Washington. Trump's supporters bristled. Some called her a traitor. But for Traoré and many Africans, it was a beacon of hope. Back in Burkina Faso, villagers celebrated, hopeful that international voices might finally amplify their struggles. Traoré's team watched the news with cautious optimism. They knew the fight was far from over, but this unexpected ally gave the movement new strength. Meanwhile, Trump's anger simmered deeper, fueling plans behind closed doors. The summit was becoming more than just a political event. It was a battleground of ideas and courage, and in that battle every voice mattered. But bravery comes with a price. Days after the summit, Traoré began receiving quiet warnings. Anonymous letters slipped under the door of his hotel room, threatening phone calls in the dead of night. "Stop this," they said, "or face the consequences." His security detail tightened, but Traoré refused to show fear. He remembered the faces of children in his country, children who deserved a future without fear. One evening alone in his room, he stared at the ceiling and whispered, "If my silence can save me, what good is it to those who suffer?" His heart ached for his people, for the mothers waiting for their children to come home safely, for the youth dreaming of peace. Traoré knew his path was dangerous, but to speak truth was his duty, and he was ready to pay whatever price that required. Days later, at a smaller but crucial press conference, Traoré spoke again, this time with even more resolve. Facing a room packed with skeptical reporters, he said, "We do not ask for charity. We ask for respect, for partnership built on honesty and equality." His voice cracked at times, but his message was clear. He shared stories of communities crushed under debt, families uprooted by war funded by foreign interests. Tears welled up as he recounted a young girl's dream of becoming a doctor, shattered by lack of schools. The world listened, some with sympathy, others with disbelief. But one thing was certain: Ibrahim Traoré had become a symbol of hope and defiance. His words sparked debates in parliaments, homes, and social media across continents. And somewhere, in the shadows, plans were being made, some to support, others to silence. But Traoré stood firm, because sometimes a single voice can change the course of history. That night, as the summit's lights dimmed and the world slept, Ibrahim Traoré sat alone in his hotel room. The glow of his phone screen illuminated countless messages from supporters and strangers worldwide. Yet amid the encouragement, there were shadows, threats, warnings, reminders of the dangerous path he had chosen. His fingers trembled as he read a message from a young girl in a distant village. "Your words gave me hope, but I fear what comes next." He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of every life that depended on him. Far away in Burkina Faso, mothers clutched their children tighter, whispering prayers for their president's safety. But Traoré's resolve only grew stronger. He whispered to himself, "Fear cannot silence the truth." The night air was heavy with uncertainty, but also with promise. Because sometimes, breaking the silence is the bravest act of all. The next morning, news outlets worldwide replayed Traoré's speech on endless loops. Commentators debated, politicians whispered, and ordinary people everywhere asked the same question. What did he say that made Trump lose his cool? Social media exploded. Millions shared clips, hashtags trended, and the story touched hearts far beyond borders. In schools, students discussed the meaning of dignity and justice. In cafes, strangers argued passionately over fairness and history. And through it all, Traoré remained steadfast, not as a mere politician, but as a symbol of courage. Yet, amid the global spotlight, the dangers lurking in the shadows grew nearer. Some feared his influence would spark unrest, others feared the silence that might follow if he fell. But one thing was clear: the world was watching, and no one could look away. During a tense international meeting days later, Traoré's presence was met with skepticism. Leaders questioned his youth, his boldness. But then Traoré shared a story, not about politics, but about people. He spoke of a village school destroyed by war, where children still dreamed of peace. He told of a mother who walked miles to find clean water for her family. His voice cracked as he described the hopes and heartbreaks behind every statistic. The room was silent, moved beyond words. Even some of his harshest critics found their eyes wet with tears. In that moment, barriers shattered. Traoré was no longer just a leader. He was a bridge, connecting hearts across continents. His message was simple but profound. We are not just numbers or nations. We are human beings, longing to be seen and heard. And that truth changed everything. Days after the summit, the pressure on Traoré intensified. Threats grew louder. Promises of support felt fragile. One evening, in a quiet room far from the cameras, he faced a choice no leader should ever have to make. Should he protect himself, retreat into safety, or stand firm for millions who had no voice? He thought of a mother he met years ago. She had lost her child to violence, yet still held hope. Her whispered words echoed in his mind. If you fall, we fall. But if you rise, we rise. Tears welled as Traoré understood. His courage was bigger than fear. He was not alone. The future of a continent depended on his choice. And with steady hands, he chose to rise. Traoré's courage sparked something impossible to ignore. Across continents, from small villages to bustling cities, people felt his words. Protests calling for justice, reform, and dignity spread. Leaders invited him to speak again, this time with respect and hope. Social media was flooded with messages of love and support. Even those once skeptical began to see the man behind the message, a man of heart and unwavering integrity. Trump's fury was still whispered about, but Traoré's truth had broken through barriers, stronger than any anger. A new chapter in U.S.-Africa relations was quietly beginning, because sometimes one voice can awaken millions. On a bright morning in Ouagadougou, Traoré stood before a crowd gathered under the African sun. Children smiled, elders wept, and a nation held its breath. He spoke softly but powerfully. We are not defined by our past, but by the strength to change our future. His eyes scanned the sea of faces, hopeful, hungry for peace. He promised to fight not just for his country, but for all who believed in justice. His journey was far from over, but one thing was certain. His message would live on. As the crowd erupted in cheers, a single tear ran down Traoré's cheek. It was a tear for every lost dream, every silent prayer, every new hope. Because in that moment, Africa stood tall, and so did its leader. Dear viewers, if this story moved you, if Captain Ibrahim Traoré's courage touched your heart, please hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful stories, and share your thoughts below. Your comments mean the world and keep these important conversations alive. Let's stand together, learn together, and rise together. Thank you for being here.